it's Candace with Grow Local, and today we're going to do a little bit of talking about gardening in heat, especially high heat. 5 things to think about. We're going to talk about watering, mulching, shading, and 2 don't do's. That will be fertilizing and pruning. So off to the races, here we go. Number 1, watering. Do it early in the morning, you guys, okay? As early as possible. If you can get up at 5 a.m., and a lot of us are anyway, feel free to get out there and do a good deep water, okay? The more water you can get into the soil early, the more they're going to be able to take up before it starts to evaporate, okay? A lot of you will say, but I want to do it at night. If you want to, go ahead. It's going to be more conducive to getting powdery mildew, and maybe the slugs are going to have a feast because you've made it just lovely for them. But if that's when you can water, go ahead and do it. Just make sure that you're watching out for things like powdery mildew. Also, water on the ground. Don't bother watering all the leaves and stuff. It's nice to do a foliar mist if you've got things like ferns and stuff growing in there. But for the most part, it's the soil that you want to get wet, because that's where the roots are going to take it up. If they've got enough moisture, the roots actually bring it up at night, and they expire it. They breathe it out through their leaves during the evening, which is sometimes why you find in the shady areas the ground is a little bit on the damp side. It's kind of cool. They share. And number 2, we will talk about mulching. There's a couple of options that you can do. I've got some samples here. One is grass clippings. Free, easy. If you are using them dry, you can put on 1 to 2 inches of mulch on top of your soil. It stays nice and light and fluffy. You still get good airflow, and it holds the moisture in. If you are using fresh cut grass, only put on maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch, okay? It has a tendency to mat down, and when it does that, it, number 1, blocks the air from going through, but it can also get a little bit on the moldy side, so you don't need as much. Pine needles. If you've got pine trees, scoop them up, put them on. It does not hurt the soil. For those of you thinking that, well, all around the tree it's dead, there's nothing growing. Well, if it's a real good thick layer of pine needles, it's because it's smothered all the weeds. Other than that, it's fine. They decompose and they'll just add nutrients to your soil. Spoiled hay works really well. One thing to be cautious about, though, is a lot of times hay has weed seeds in it, and they might get in your garden, and if you don't like pulling weeds, it might be something that you're not too keen to use. The other one, straw. You can get a bale of straw for pretty cheap. Works really, really well. And again, don't put it on in slabs. When you get if you get a bale of straw, it's going to come out almost like in wedges from the way it's processed and packaged. Just loosen it up, because again, you want airflow, you don't want this stuff to mat down. And what else? You could use shredded paper. That works okay, but it has a tendency to fly around. So if you're not in a real windy area, that might work for you. In the fall, awesome possum, use your leaves. Just make sure that you run them through a shredder, whether you throw them on the ground and run over them with the lawnmower, put them in a garbage can and use your weed whacker on them. Just make sure that they're small, because if you put them on whole, a lot of times they get compacted, they mat down, and again, you're going to get more mold than you are going to get the benefits of holding the moisture in. And so that's water, that's mulch, shade. There's a product out there called shade cloth, and you can get that. It works so well, and it's in different percentages. You can get 25%, 50%, 100%, and that just means that's how much sun it blocks from your plants. If you don't have access to something like that, use a bed sheet. Easy peasy, or an old tablecloth. Put it on during the heat of the day. It's just going to stop the sun from scorching your plants. It's going to keep your soil a little more on the moist side. If it's a nice light cotton sheet, you can just lay it down on top of the plants. It's not going to hurt it. At night, you can pull it off if you want. Or if you've got one of those old fitted sheets that's just kicking around, just put 4 posts in the ground, flip your sheet on top, it holds itself in place and it works really, really well. If you only have 1 or 2 plants that you need to do, you can actually just make a little square box and tack your shade cloth around it, put it on top. When you don't need it anymore, you remove it. Okay? It's easy again. What not to do. Don't fertilize. Whatever you do, please don't fertilize. The plants are stressed enough. They're having a hard time keeping themselves good and healthy and not burning to a crisp. If you give them fertilizer, it triggers those, oh my goodness, I need to grow, I need to produce. They got enough stuff to contend with. Leave them be until it cools down. And when I say cools down, it means probably less than 80 degrees. They'll say 90. 85 is their cautionary, so I go with 80 because nobody listens to you, so they'll go up to 85 anyway, and you're still safe. The other thing I don't want you to do is prune. Again, it's a stress factor. If you leave your plants alone, what you should prune off is just going to be providing shade during the heat wave, and it's not going to cause this plant any stress. Not only are they dealing with a lot of heat, not enough water, but now you've given them a wound that they have to deal with. So again, don't prune until the heat wave's over, okay? Oh, one other thing that's always kind of fun is if you are planting your garden, plant really, really thick. If you can plant your plants way, way, way too heavily, you can prune them as you go. You hit a heat wave, you've got these massive amounts of greenery that are providing mulch. They're shading each other out and you won't have to water as much. This bed, in spite of the fact that it's got squash, it's got carrots, it's got tomatoes, I've got cucumbers and beans, I've got my herbs and calendula on this end, this is actually the bed that I water the least. I'll come up in the morning and it's still damp and it's still good to go because I've got so much shade. We're also going to show you a little shot where if you don't have a lot of room and you like your flowers, you can grow your veggies and your flowers together and they do really well. You've got all the pollinators coming along, they're helping to pollinate your garden, and it looks pretty.